Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Nicolas. I'm here with Vlad. We are both working at SAITA Energy Flexibility, a Dutch startup. And the main project that SAITA is busy with is the Flex Measures project, also at LF Energy. But today I will not speak a lot about that. Actually, I've been here before and I spoke more about Flex Measures, what we did with it. And today it's more about open standards and, well, the open source part of it as well. How can we, with open source software, actually support open standards, and what are they good for? There's one standard in particular that we are busy with right now, and I'll also have a little bit of time, or we, to go into what S2 is. Some of you might find that interesting. Well, on the big scale, why do open standards matter? We had a couple talks early this morning about open standards in charging, and it's clear that they actually are relevant for large-scale uptake, for large-scale innovation in these fields that we're working in, energy in this case. Home energy management is the case that I'm talking about now, so not charging. Charging is basically part of the homes, and we're further below in the stack. The S2 standard is what we're interested in today, and there's some implementation work. So first, yeah, open standards are great. Maybe it's even better than being perfect. It's being standardized, so it can actually be used to build other things, and it can be scaled and replicated. And everybody knows this, I think. So I will not even spend more time on it, but this is, of course, a problem we all have to live with, and also I will touch upon that because the S2 standard, for instance, is not without competition. There's different opinions for sure, and even different regulation bodies. And right now on LinkedIn, somebody posted this a week ago. There's lots of home energy management standards, and he was even making the point that they're all, maybe for some onlookers, they look the same. All of these things, don't they all basically do the same thing? It's information within the house about the energy consuming things, and why are there so many? I don't actually share the opinion. I think the same person actually tried to put them in different groups. Yeah, we heard about a couple of them here in this field this morning, so they have a place. And certainly here, these are all very different things actually, and it's you need a couple of them to make actually a HEMS system work. I'm not sure I totally agree with the distinction being made here that this and then EE bus here are, in their own groups. Well, it's all matter of opinions, of course. If I have to maybe very quickly look into some standards that I have a little bit of an idea of, I would say OpenADR actually is more concerned with the grid side of what should the house do towards the grid, should be flexible and help the grid. So we got the DSOs, for instance, on that side a lot, but also aggregators. And then in the house, in the building, you have the E-bus mostly, maybe then competing with S2, and I see the differences. And there we are not, at this one standard situation that we all want to have, and we will never be, probably. Then in the end, you have in the middle of this, you need something that actually makes the integration that possible, and our project Flex Measures could be one of those, and we're working on that. And then there's concepts within these. So here you got a virtual top node on OpenADR, and Flex Measures could be a virtual end node there. We haven't done that, but we're working on the S2 side, where you have resource managers in the building, and then Flex Measures is the customer energy manager, to give you a little bit of concepts there. And this is something we are working on, and we'll talk about a bit more later on. Actually, there's more projects then that make it, that are actual open source projects that help you make these integrations possible. There's an LF Energy project for OpenADR, and this would be nice. So basically, this is the messaging. And here's the messaging that you need here. That's also a project, and we do work heavily on that. Well, the situation is, if you compare it to EE-Bus, which in Germany has a larger community and big companies as champions behind it, then S2 is more at the beginning, but I think it has more chances to be more international. And I will just spend a small time now talking about uptake of energy, or of open standards in general and in the energy world, before then Vlad goes more into more details of some things that we're actually busy with and things that we provide and that you could collaborate on. Actually, so this is from a paper. I did some research. So what are the criteria why organizations at some point decide, yes, I want this standard and I want an open standard, or if I have the choice, I would actually choose this over the other. This is the list of things that came out on top. There's even a big table. It's a nice paper maybe to read. But I would also boil it down to these three things that are all necessary for something like an open standard to really succeed. Not just being a nice standard, but actually have big uptake. Maybe being the one standard that finally does rule them all, but maybe belong to the 2 or 3 standards that actually get implementation. And that's even some examples. I added this recently because yesterday there was a talk about podcasting 2.0 as an open standard here at FOSDEM, and how Apple actually gave it the push it needed. Regulation is a topic that is huge in energy. Germany, for instance, has a very famous article in their Energiegesetz, which is like the Germans would do, too detailed and too long. And we heard about EE-Bus already. Somebody else this morning said it's clumsy, and I heard it. Yeah, it's more of a German thing, and that might have to do with this part here, the regulation. But we'll talk about this part today, of course, or that's why we're here. Developers are necessary. That's where the innovation actually happens. And sometimes this is the part that makes the last decision which standard really takes over. I'm old enough to have seen this happen when everybody said XML, that's of course everything that the internet will do, SOAP, and so on. And then it went a different way, right? In energy, when I compare it to the internet, I find these problems here. I will not read them out one by one. A lot of you know or have dealt with these problems in your daily lives. I like this, for instance. I want to highlight this last one, that in the houses, in the buildings, there's different sectors actually trying to do similar things, but then competing for resources like the grid connection. If you have electrified heating, but also electrified EV charging, two very big new actors in the electrified home, then they compete. Or we have an actual home energy management system that can bring them together, but it makes it a bit more complex and has to unify players who don't know each other, and so on and so on. I will give the floor to Vlad now.
Thank you. Before I start, because we have a few, does anyone, or has everyone ever heard of the S2 standard? Just curious. No? Okay, nice. So I have my job cut out. So S2 standards is the new standard, of course. It's the only one that we're going to need. I'm kind of joking. It's a bit ironic that now, after Nicola's introduction, we're introducing a new standard, but this is a much simpler standard that is aimed towards the in-house flexibility. So normally flexibility, you are thinking of in the industrial area, where it's easy to do and it's valuable. But to do it at a small scale, so the in-house level, it's quite difficult, and it requires the communication between not just the HEMs, but also the OEMs, so the people that actually produce the heaters, the batteries that we're going to put in our house. So the S2 standard focuses on figuring out, okay, what flexibility do devices in-house have? And it does that by creating 8 generic flexibility capabilities. So you have power modulation, where you can think of a device that can adjust the amount of power it produces, so like a, let's say, diesel generator. Buffer energy, or so that can be like a boiler that you can then later use to heat, to have hot water. Limit the production and consumptions Those are the solar panels where you can limit the amount that you want, so curtail. Store energy, of course, batteries. Pause a task. This is quite interesting. You have the new, how's it called, like washing machines or dishwashers where you can pause the task, to wait in case the grid is way too congested. Alternative profile with the same result. This again comes back to the washing machines or the dishwashers that have certain steps that they need to do in a certain order, but they all end up in the same place. Switch the energy source. There's different kinds of devices now that can work both on electricity or on gas. So you can decide based on, let's say, the price of the energy, which type you want to use. And then the shifting time, it's quite simple. You just postpone something for later. So let's say you get your car in house, but you only need it in the morning. So then the system might decide that you can charge it maybe later in the night. Now these 5 generic flexibility capabilities are finally combined in S2 into 5 control types. And these are the 5 control types that the OEMs will have to define into their own devices. So basically, let's say we have, and I'm going to give some examples later, but let's say we have a power station that has to charge a battery, then that kind of control type is called the fill rate based control. So it controls how the battery is charging, how it's discharging. This all kind of information is given to the S2 system by the OEM, and is the only kind of information that the HAMS then needs in order to give a very, let's say, performance scheduling. So let's go into some. This is just the big slide where it shows that people and companies are starting to adopt S2 and working with it, testing it out. This is one of the projects that it's a bit more closed source. It's designed to prevent grid congestion in neighborhood, and they use the S2 to have the communication between devices, so like charging stations, and then a central control of the neighborhood that can accommodate everything. A more in-depth project, let's say, it's the TUNS project, where SETA and TNO, together with 2 different companies, worked on showing a proof of concept for a heat pump and a heat buffer, for multiple apartments. So this is both a open source and a closed source collaborative project. We have in the open source part, we have FlexMeasure, which deals with the scheduling, the Home Assistant app, which is basically the SEM, and that communicates through S2 with a resource manager. And then the resource manager gets the information from the closed source, the heat buffer and the heat pump. It gets the information about those 2 devices, transmits them to S2 to the SEM, and then the SEM gives this flex measures the information that it can then schedule how to schedule the whole house. Finally is the project I am working on. So I joined SETA 2 months ago, and this is the project I've been working on, which is called Kiflin. The idea is to create a HAMS environment that it's fully S2 compatible, and we do that in 2 ways. First of all, we want to open source a new algorithm called profile steering, which is specifically tailored for S2 devices, so it can schedule any kind of the control types that I presented to you before.
It's not new though.
Sorry?
You said it's new, but actually it's not new.
Oh, it's not new, but we are open sourcing in FlexMeasure.
TNO wrote it.
Quite a while back, yeah.
And they gave it into the FlexMeasures project.
And then finally, it's the realization of the first batch of S2 compliant devices with Ito Daldo. Sorry, I'm not Dutch, so my pronunciation is not amazing. Finally, I want to present to you the open source projects where S2 is involved and where we are involved. Of course, we first have the S2 Python. We support all the S2 type of messages and control types. Very easy to implement, and it gives also message checking. FlexMeasure, which is our core technology that we work on, supports the SEM side of S2. So as I said before, we're going to introduce a new kind of, we're going to introduce profile steering, which is a different way of creating scheduling. We also have The flex measure, we're going to create a new tutorial for building an open source HEMS. Thank you. And finally, we are hoping to support the vent side of OpenADR in the future. All these projects are on GitHub, they are open source, and you are also free to talk to us and contact us in case you have any kind of idea or you got inspired by S2 and you want to make it the new standard. I think this is it for now. Thank you very much for your time, and if there are any questions. Okay, quite a lot. Yeah.
Well, I presume you've got a sort of chicken and egg problem with lack of suppliers and existing, difficult to build the software without the additional already having hardware support. Are there any sort of generic modules you could get to say like a smart? If you consider maybe having like a smart socket which will like turn on and off a device, or something you could use to basically retrofit an existing piece of hardware, like a washing machine or something. So,
if you
I haven't heard about it. I just know that Ito Dalderop is one of the actual OEMs, but you're right. The question was actually, to repeat that, the chicken egg problem also consists of getting the hardware support so that the device manufacturers actually support their part of S2. And then the second part of the question was, is there maybe some support in getting some sockets for existing devices to make them retrofit for this S2 standard? So I know the first part is true, and we have luckily in this last project, Kiflin project, an actual heat pump manufacturer who is committing to make their ecosystem actually of devices compatible. For the second part, actually, it's a good idea, but I don't know any.
I don't think there's any projects right now, but as S2 is designed, I don't see any way why a user could not define, for example, the kind of flexibility. Let's say you plug a washing machine into a socket, as you said, and then you define it yourself. Okay, this is the kind of control it has, what kind of profiles it has. And then you pass down to the HEMS, and the HEMS can decide what and how to do with them, what to do with them. I think that's it.
All right. We'll be around if the topic's interesting.
Thank you.